The winter of 1777-78 at Valley Forge had forged something unbreakable in Washington's army, but as spring thawed the Pennsylvania ground, the war refused to wait. In June 1778, the British evacuated Philadelphia. Sir Henry Clinton, now in command, marched 10,000 men across New Jersey toward New York, baggage trains stretching for miles, Loyalist families trailing behind in fear of Patriot reprisals. Washington shadowed them, keeping his newly disciplined Continentals just out of reach, waiting for the right moment. That moment came on June 28 at Monmouth Courthouse. The day dawned brutally hot. Temperatures climbed toward 100 degrees. Clinton's rearguard lagged, and Washington saw his chance. He ordered General Charles Lee, recently exchanged and restored to high rank, to attack with 5,000 men. Lee moved hesitantly, then inexplicably ordered a retreat when the British turned to fight. Confusion spread. Men fell back in disorder under a merciless sun. Washington rode on to the field like a thunderbolt. He found Lee's troops streaming rearward and halted them with a voice that carried over cannon fire. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Lee stammered excuses. Washington's reply was icy. "You have disgraced yourself and the army." He relieved Lee on the spot, rallied the retreating men, and formed a new line across a rise of ground. All afternoon the battle raged. Volleys, bayonet charges, artillery duels in suffocating heat. Soldiers collapsed from sunstroke, yet the Americans held. When darkness finally ended the fight, both sides claimed victory, but the British slipped away in the night. Clinton reached New York unmolested, yet the myth of British invincibility suffered another blow. For the first time, Continental regulars had stood against redcoats in open field and refused to break. The French alliance, sealed in February 1778, now began to show its weight. In July, Admiral D'Estaing arrived off Delaware Bay with 12 ships of the line and 6 frigates, France's first open naval commitment. Too late to trap the British in Philadelphia, he followed Clinton to New York, hoping to blockade the harbor and force a decisive battle. The British fleet inside was slightly weaker, but the pilots warned D'Estaing that the bar at Sandy Hook was too shallow for his heavy ships. He hesitated, then withdrew to Rhode Island. There the Allies planned their first joint operation, recapture Newport, held by 6,000 British under General Robert Pigot. Washington sent Nathanael Greene and Lafayette with a strong Continental detachment to cooperate with D'Estaing's fleet and General John Sullivan's New England militia. The operation started well. French ships forced the British squadron in Newport harbor to scuttle or burn their vessels. But then a violent gale scattered D'Estaing's fleet, damaging several ships and forcing them to limp to Boston for repairs. Sullivan's militia, already uneasy about serving under French command, grew restless. When D'Estaing announced he must sail for the West Indies to protect French interests there, many Americans felt betrayed. Sullivan's force assaulted the British lines anyway, was repulsed, and withdrew in bitterness. The failure at Newport sparked ugly incidents. In Boston, French and American sailors brawled on the wharves. Newspapers grumbled about allies who fought only when it suited Paris. Washington spent weeks writing letters, soothing egos, reminding everyone that France's entry had already forced Britain to disperse her strength across the globe. Without French ships and money, he argued, the revolution would have collapsed long ago. Slowly the storm passed, but the lesson was clear. Coalition warfare was as much diplomacy as combat. With no major operations possible in the north, the war shifted south. Clinton and Lord George Germain had fixed on the Carolinas and Georgia as Britain's best hope. The region was distant from Washington's main army, thinly populated, dotted with loyalists, and vulnerable to naval power. In December 1778, a small British expedition under Archibald Campbell seized Savannah almost without resistance. Georgia fell quickly. The next target was Charleston, the richest city in the South, the key to the Carolinas. In the spring of 1780, Clinton himself sailed south with 14,000 men, the largest force Britain had yet committed to a single American operation. He landed near Charleston in February, invested the city, and began methodical siege works. American commander Benjamin Lincoln had about 6,000 men inside the defenses, but morale was low and supplies short. For 6 weeks the bombardment continued. British parallels crept closer. On May 12, 1780, Lincoln surrendered, the worst American defeat of the entire war. 5,000 Continentals and militia went into captivity. Charleston, the pride of the South, was in British hands. Cornwallis took command in the interior. He crushed the remnants of American resistance at Camden in August, routing Horatio Gates so thoroughly that the general fled the field on the fastest horse he could find. The South seemed lost, yet the deeper truth was different. British victories in the Carolinas stretched their lines thin, inflamed patriot resistance, and turned neutral farmers into bitter enemies. Cornwallis controlled the towns, but the countryside belonged to men like Francis Marion the Swamp Fox, who struck from hidden camps, cut supply lines, and vanished into the marshes. While the southern fire smoldered, the north settled into watchful stalemate. Clinton held New York, but dared not venture far. Washington ringed Manhattan with a cordon of posts from Connecticut to New Jersey, blockading the British without risking open battle. Raids and skirmishes flared Stony Point, Paulus Hook, but no decisive clash. Both armies waited, exhausted, for the next move. That move came from an unexpected quarter. In September 1780, a shocking betrayal unfolded. Benedict Arnold, the hero of Quebec, Valker Island, and Saratoga, now military governor of West Point, had been secretly corresponding with Sir Henry Clinton. Disgusted by Congress's neglect, embittered by slights real and imagined, tempted by promises of wealth and rank, Arnold agreed to surrender West Point, a key fortress controlling the Hudson, for £20,000. The plot unraveled when British Major John Andre, carrying incriminating papers, was captured by militiamen near Tarrytown. Arnold fled downriver to a British ship, escaping capture by minutes. Andre was tried as a spy, condemned, and hanged. The nation reeled. One of its brightest stars had turned traitor. Washington called it treachery of the blackest dye. Yet the loss of West Point was averted, and the army's loyalty held firm. The year 1780 closed in gloom. Charleston gone, Gates disgraced, Arnold unmasked, mutinies brewing in winter camps over arrears of pay and rotten rations. Yet beneath the surface, the tide was turning. French troops under Rochambeau had landed at Newport in July. 6,000 disciplined veterans who brought not only muskets but gold, supplies, and the promise of naval support. Britain's resources were stretched to breaking. War with France, Spain, Holland. Fleets blockaded. Armies pinned down across the globe. The longer the war lasted, the weaker London became. In the south, Nathanael Greene replaced Gates and began a campaign of calculated risk. He divided his small force, sending Daniel Morgan west with 600 men. At Cowpens in January 1781, Morgan lured Tarleton's legion into a trap. When the British charged, the American militia feigned flight, drew Tarleton forward, then wheeled and struck from both flanks. The legion was annihilated, most killed or captured. Cornwallis, furious, burned his baggage to lighten his army and chased Greene across North Carolina in a desperate race to the Dam River. Greene slipped across just in time. Boats waiting on the far bank. Cornwallis, exhausted and far from supplies, retreated to Wilmington. The stage was set for the final act. Cornwallis marched into Virginia, hoping to link with the British naval squadron and crush resistance there. Washington and Rochambeau secretly moved south. Admiral de Grasse sailed from the West Indies with 28 ships of the line. On September 5, 1781, the French fleet met the British off the Virginia Capes and held the bay. Cornwallis was trapped at Yorktown. The siege began October. French heavy guns pounded British lines day and night. Redoubts fell to storming parties led by Alexander Hamilton and the French. On October 17, Cornwallis asked for terms. On October 19, his army, more than 7,000 men, marched between silent ranks of American and French troops in grounded arms. The band played a tune that captured the irony of the moment. The world turned upside down. Peace negotiations crawled forward in Paris. Britain, battered on every front, finally recognized American independence in the Treaty of the New Nation stretched from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. The war had been long, brutal, uncertain, yet through every reverse Monmouth's heat, Newport's disappointment, Charleston's fall, Arnold's treason, Valley Forge's cold, Yorktown's triumph, the American cause endured. It endured because ordinary people, farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, women who managed farms while husbands fought, refused to accept defeat. They believed in something larger than themselves, a government deriving its just powers from the consent of the governed. That belief, tested at Monmouth, betrayed at West Point, redeemed at Yorktown, carried them through. And when the last British sail vanished over the horizon, 13 colonies had become something new. The United States of America, perfect, not finished, but born in the conviction that free people could govern themselves, and that no empire, however mighty, could forever deny them that right. The world had changed, and the change had begun not with kings or parliaments, but with men and women who, in the heat of battle and the cold of winter, simply would not yield.